Good morning, everybody. 21st of August, 2021. Last round of the year. And, a big part of me says, thank God for that, because we are going to, in one lengthy autopsy after what's been a very interesting and a very Carlton season. Riley Starr is my name, and I'm joined by the very esteemed guest. He is one of the three men from the jumper punch, but more importantly, in the Blue Abroad family, he has clearly the best legs. I speak, of course, Bastiani. Mate, how are you?
I'm very well, man. I'm flattered by the introduction. Looking forward to doing this first time I've lobbed myself on the Saturday morning show. So it's a little bit of time away from the racing and stuff, from looking at the fields in the morning. So yeah, no better way to spend a Saturday morning.
Oh, very, very honoured. And of course, you are going to give us a little bit of form later on from Moonee Valley. I understand
Yes,
big races out there.
It's a show that's encompassing all parts of sports this morning, Riley, because as you said off air, I don't think our boys are going to. Well, they haven't really enamoured us this year, have they?
No, that's putting it kindly. And I've got to say, this morning's going to be a little bit of a different pace, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to sort of go into it, as you can see from the banner below. What's gone wrong? Our sort of view of it. I think we got a feeling what will happen tonight. I hope we're wrong, but in all milestone games this year, pretty much we've been bitterly disappointing. And I think what we need to touch on this morning, there's a couple of comments from Eddie Betts the other night. If you haven't watched that, go and watch it. It's probably the best episode that Blue Abroad's ever had. It was just outstanding. Yep. There's a couple of comments I really want to touch on that sort of pricked my ears and just reaffirm some of my views. But let's get straight into it, Paolo. This review, which was handed down last week, it's been all-encompassing the second half of the season. From a summary level, Luke Sayer said we're going to release a summary of it. This will probably be released in the next 48 hours. What are some of the anticipated findings you think we're going to have that we can sort of prepare for as a fan base? I mean, there's probably stuff we already know, but what do you think we're going to find?
Well, I think two of the biggest things that will come out of it are your communication channels and how the club goes about not only communicating internally, but even just with its fans. Really, I think it's been nothing short of poor for the majority of the year, I think. And I think the other thing that will come out of it too is, and we heard it last year, and we're probably going to hear about it again this year, is people with certain job titles and job descriptions leaving their lane and interfering in stuff that they haven't been hired for. So as I referred to this on the jumper punch as well. It's let the CEO manage what he has to manage. Let the list manager manage what he has to manage. Let the list manager list manage. Let the fitness staff worry about the fitness. Let the head of football worry about football. The moment you start trying to intertwine and belittle others and sort of step outside your lane, so to speak, I think it just sets a terrible precedent for people in the role, and then two, I think it just shows lack of trust. Really, and I think you see that on the football field too with our team. There's no buy-in, and I think you'll see that from the off-field perspective as well. I think the mindset off the field, is, for lack of a better phrase, I think it's a piss take, to be honest.
No, mate, I fully agree. I watched Carlton, and I've said this a lot this year. When you look at the best sporting organisations worldwide in esports, so let's take before Tom Brady left, the New England Patriots, for example. You take your Bayern Munich's is a great example of this. You look at the NRL, the Melbourne Storm, or even the All Blacks in rugby union. One word that always comes to mind with them, or two words actually: united and uncompromising. They are united in the cause, and they are uncompromising in the application to achieve their desired outcomes. Unfortunately, when I've watched Carlton this year, and for a long time, but particularly this year, we seem like one of the most compromising football clubs out there, or have been. It encompasses the whole joint, from team selection to, our efforts on the field and very much the inconsistencies of that. And that's why I think you're spot on there with the communication and whatnot, and it being a piss take, because culturally, to me from the outside as a fan, it looks immensely poor. And I don't know how you can have a good culture in there when you've had you've had so much failure over the last 18, 19 years. There's different, the culture of, people getting along and all that, and that's great. But ultimately, the culture that matters in a sporting institution for me is winning, as it should. That's why you play. You play to win.
Yeah, exactly right. Like, I think, and Poppy and I always love to reference Roy Keane in these situations, that you're playing sport and you're in the work industry to win in that type of industry, and you're not. I mean, some of the best players, they're not there to make mates. They're there to go out, do a job, win their game of football, and then go home to their families. So, I mean, and I don't think, and I don't know how in depth it will go with regards to the review of the football department and the actual football side of things, if that makes sense. But I think one thing it will highlight, and you can see it out on the field, is that I know in that there was that that text that went about that was saying, that the players, they play Hollywood football, and however true that was, I don't know, I'm sure there were bits and pieces of it that may have been, but you take it with a grain of salt. But I think the one thing that I looked at this year is that the team, and I think the club for that matter as well, that they don't value the little things that make up the big things. So, your one percenters, defensive transition, and defending at all costs, really, when it's all going downhill. So I think that term Hollywood football is a perfect synopsis for where our footy club is at the moment. So, and like we talk about the off-field, that apparently the club have got the off-field right. Okay, maybe financially they have, but I think there is still some it's a toxic environment, I think, off the field. And when I say toxic, I don't just mean that like it's a horrible place to rock up and go to work with. I just mean that they don't, like, there's just no care factor. There's no buy-in. There's no want to do those one percenters, to spoil, to defend, to do the ugly stuff, to make the good stuff and make the flashy stuff actually mean something. So when we've looked on this year, we've looked okay, but you've got to be good enough for long enough. And for me, like, the off-field standards and the on-field standards have us ranked where, 13th.
Yeah, no, 13th, probably going to 14th. And when you even look at it in more granular or more overall, we are 13th purely on the basis of pretty much Harry Mackay, Jacob Wiedering, and Sam Walsh, with little sprinklings around, with coaching, which has been called out many times as incompetent, with defensively particularly, inconsistent. I have to say, there was a particular moment that I now look back on as where the signal was really bad this year. And everyone talks about round 2 with the Collingwood game, which is completely legitimate. I'm going back earlier. There was the pre-game presser that David Teague had. I don't know if you remember, when we played St Kilda in the pre-season game. The pre-season game. And he's come out and basically said, to the effect of, we're very confident with these new rules, these slick ball movement, we're going to be all down attacking, was pretty much the essence of what he said. And that's where I now identify the moment as like, we are in enormous trouble, because the mistakes were made before then. I don't know why, and this is seemingly to me, and I know it's evolution of a game plan, but you basically refined a game plan so much to be so focused on one element of a game, only when the players have come back essentially in January, because of the extended season last year. So you don't have 2 months to train it in. You come back in January with a new playing list, but the same coaches, the same ideas. There were so many mistakes made in that period of time that we're going to look back on, I think, set up the season for failure. And I think to me, I cannot remember a game plan or a plan A that has such little margin for error as a football club, really, because last week was a good example. I mean, they gave up last week, but we were flying. The pressure went off a fraction, and it fell apart.
Yeah, I think that's been the case. Yeah, I think that's been the case for the whole year. Really, it's literally 2 kicks from the opposition and they're through. And how many times have you seen this year when opposition teams get out the back of our press and it's a 4-on-2 in their favour or a 5-on-3 in their favour. And, I think too, like, you can have these game plans and certain game plans that you've written up that probably do work. But the problem is that if you don't have 18 blokes on the field buying in and not believing, you can have the best game plan in the world, and it's not going to work really. So I think from my point of view, my issue is the biggest breakdown for me this year is, mate, the tactical nous from like the mindset. The mindset, the planning, and the tactical nous and lack of opposition knowledge and where they're going to move the ball from our coach's box this year has been it's been diabolical. Really, it's been absolutely diabolical. And from my point of view as well, it's that that's your coaches are hired to instill that. And people saying, we've got to get assistants around Teague. Mate, he's supposed to make those assistants better. That's what a good coach does. That's what a good head coach does. So, and people saying, he hasn't been given time, and these coaches haven't been given time, and everything. Like his win rate is going down at the moment. It's continually regressing, and mate, time is just, for me, time's just an arbitrary factor in a coaching tenure. Really, it's just it doesn't prove that because we give you time that you're going to be able to fix it. He's had, you go back to round 2, Riley, that horrible defensive transition that we had throughout that game. He's had, how long to resolve it? Like 17 rounds, 19 rounds, 20 rounds then. And the same problems still arise. So I don't know what keeping him there is going to, what's going to change. He's had 3 to 4 months to change it, and nothing's happened.
Yeah.
We've got worse. We've become worse.
No, we have, and we've gotten progressively worse in his tenure. With a better list. You look at last year: 7 wins, 10 losses, 94%. This year, 8 wins, 13 losses, percentage of 88.7. And injuries were similar-ish last year. Personnel this year, you can certainly argue, is better. It's ready, and the thing that people, for me, and this is just an opinion, I completely. Understand you see the headline, we're going after another coach, right? We're sacking another coach. But you need to admit as a business, whatever you think of the powers that be above, that you just got the appointment wrong. Maybe you didn't set him up correctly, sure. But I don't know if you could have set him up as much as you could if it would have succeeded because of the things you mentioned. His philosophy, rightly or wrongly, he comes from, the John Worsfold mentoring, and even to a lesser extent, the Phil Walsh mentoring. Now, Phil Walsh, not so much, but let's talk John Worsfold. You read about John Worsfold. He was, we'll put our best against your best and see who wins. That was his philosophy as a coach.
Is Woosher at the club, is he?
No.
If you go on the Jumper Punch page, go on the Jumper Punch page on Facebook, there's a parody there of Where's Wally. We did a Where's Woosher. Yeah, if anyone wants to go on the page and try to find him. I mean, what? I mean, I know this saying's been used a lot, but Teague's papers were almost stamped when that appointment occurred. It was eerily similar to when Walls was appointed to watch over Bolton. And the moment you do that, mate, you just start undermining their position. It just shows, for me, I don't know if Teague was a part of it, but I just think it's just a lack of trust, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And I think, too, I will say, though, I think Teague was right to a certain point where he said that the board, had failed to back him during the year, which is true, really. If you don't want the bloke, just tell him. There's no point, prolonging the inevitable, which is what they've done until the last couple of days. So, look, I think it's just gone. Back to the question here: what went wrong? It's just everywhere. Everywhere's gone wrong, aside from maybe a couple of individuals who have really stood up in adversity. Walsh, Wiedering, Mackay. But again, like people go, you've had injuries. I mean, we've had our 3 best players on the park all year, and we haven't been able to conjure up a finals berth, which is really disappointing, I think. And you heard what Eddie said on our on the tribute. He said this list is more talented than the one he's got at Adelaide, than the one he was at when he made a grand final with Adelaide. So was that a little subliminal message saying that the coaches are maybe not good enough?
Yeah, I think it was. I'm glad you touched on it because that one was one of the things that Eddie said that stood out to me because I agree. I have been consistent, and we're going to get Leckdog in the next few minutes because he's the same of the similar opinion. The list is there are holes to fill, which we'll go into shortly. But I think by and large, on a talent on paper perspective, is the least of our problems. I really believe so.
I think, like for me, the off-season we had in 2020 when we acquired Sard and Williams, I thought the Sard trade was, at the time, pick 8, I thought, geez, it's a bit over the top. I would have preferred us to sort of try to split that pick 8 into 2 first-rounders, use 1 first-rounder on Sard and then try and use another one on a drafted player. And Pommy and I are really big on this. We seem to over the last sort of 2 to 3 years be filling up our holes with recruits from other clubs. And for me, it's a worrying thing because I don't think you can really build a culture, so to speak, and a real camaraderie between a football team when you're recruiting blokes from other clubs. I just don't. It's not a thing for me. Pommy and I have gone back and looked at the numbers with this as well, and the premiership teams of the last sort of maybe decade. The majority of their playing squad on grand final day and throughout the season had been drafted footballers, players that actually gone out, picked up in the AFL draft and developed themselves. And I think from my point of view, I think it undermines, the development at your football club to have to go and poach ready-made players from other clubs. So look, and I keep saying it, whether or not they're consciously aware that their development systems are not good or subconsciously, unaware or aware that their development systems are no good. I think the last 2 to 3 years has stunk of shortcut, really. And I know for a fact that the club did not go through a process to hire the coach as well. So
everyone knows that. Everyone knows that. There was an interview with Voss for publicity as much as anything else. Yeah, that's my opinion. And then there was really nothing else that happened beyond that. It's with recruitment. So that's a good segue in. How are you going to react if we get Adam Chera and we trade pick 6?
Not well.
Me either.
I just think look. I just back yourself. What could? From my point of view, when I look at the guys that we have brought in, right? Williams, Sard, and whatnot. What have they given to us this year that a pick 8 or a pick in the draft, could have given us? They haven't been like Sard's year has been pretty good, no doubt about that. But Williams is, sheesh. I know he's a free agent, but good God, that's it's a big chunk of money to be throwing at someone who you dubbed as a midfielder, and now that's pretty much failed. So, for me, from a recruiting perspective, I've written down here midfield. That is the sole part of the ground that we need to target because it's wafer thin, Riley. There's no depth. There's absolutely no depth in our midfield, and I think that's where we get found out week in, week out, not just from an efficiency point of view or an ability to, take the game by the scruff of the neck. I think defensively our midfield's horrific.
Oh, mate, it's horrendous. I fully agree with you there. We need to target midfield. I've probably went a little bit wider in my expense. So I had 3 things. There's obviously positions of need, so midfield.
Yeah.
But the other one as well, and we need to bring in drafted players. But I'm still of the belief when you have this sort of review and you find massive cultural issues, you don't bring in all new people, but you can bring in culture setters. So your Luke Hodges of the world, that for me is so important. So it's why if I was Carlton, as unlikely as this is, the first bloke I would target, if you were to give money for 2 or 3 years, I wouldn't be against a Luke Parker. Vice captain of Sydney, a winning culture, still playing really good football in that midfield, and he can help to build, be a pillar. We need pillars in that joint for me, and then you help build the culture within from that. That's just me.
I think the one guy that's become available, I know he may renounce his retirement. I don't know if he has it, but Bashar Houli might be. He was the name that first came to mind when he announced that he wouldn't be going on at Richmond. I don't know how. I mean, from a leadership point of view, I'm not too sure exactly what he brings from a vocal perspective. Obviously, because I haven't watched Richmond, in depth really, but I think he would be perfect for that type of role. I think he's a humble character. He's a winner. He knows what premierships are all about as well. And I think someone like him would be a brilliant mentor for the playing group. And he's a mad Carlton man growing up, and I'm sure there's still a little bit of navy blue blood seeping through his veins at the moment. I'm sure he'd want to see the Blues get up there eventually. So maybe someone like that. I don't think our club is we're not very innovative when it comes to that sort of stuff, if that makes sense.
No,
we're not, Sauce really, in the draft was really tricky. I think he was really intelligent with the way he, wheeled and dealed and moved picks and got players in. But I think after he's left, it's just, I don't know. It's reeked of desperation, Riley, with regards to what we're doing at the trade table and what we're doing with regards to recruiting players. So, and I think another position we need to focus on too is the ruck. I hear people are telling me that Peter Laddams may be available, and he's sort of interested in potentially coming along. He may be someone we look at.
Yeah, no, I think that's the other need that for me. It's midfield ruck, and then if you're looking a little further, I think we need more key defender depth. Because that's sort of been found. I mean, Liam Jones is 32. The decline can happen quickly, so I feel like we need to get someone in there. It's why you thought the start of the year guy like Fisher Mackesy, potentially from Adelaide, but he's contracted. So then you either look in the draft, or potentially you try and, for me, if I was Carlton, I'd be giving the Brisbane Lions a call because they've got an oversupply of key defenders. Darcy Gardner, you've got your Marcus Adams, obviously, and Andrews. That's not going to happen with Andrews, but and even Jack Payne. So even like a Gardner or a Payne to come in and be that extra depth we need, and potentially play first 22 footy. But ruck is a massive one because I don't see right now Tom De Koning, as pleasing as aspects of his development has been this year. He's not a full-time ruck. He's a ruck forward for me right now, and probably throughout his career. He's a ruck forward. He's not a ruck.
Yeah, I think it's more just along the lines of how they decide to develop him and where his best position is too. I mean, ruck forward, he can't even set shot.
Yes, well, that's true.
His set shot the last couple of weeks has been horrible. But look, he's still very raw and still very young too. But you can't. I mean, I think we've been using that as an excuse for too long as well. But look, I mean, I think rucks take a little extra longer to develop. I mean, you look at Tim English from the Doggies. It took him sort of really 2 to 3 years to play, to play consistently or to have consistent game time at the level, and then for that to in turn to become, fully fledged AFL form, and for him to become a fully fledged AFL footballer. But going back to what you said about the back line, look, they can go out and get players, but I mean, I'd be resting our laurels on Brodie Kemp. I mean, just have some faith in the young fella. He's good. He's a good size. He's a good mover. He's a nice kick of the ball as well. And we don't know how long Jones is going to be out for with that. I think he's got a broken patella. Is that right?
Yes,
fractured knee or something. So that could be a that's going to hinder his preseason clearly. So I think it's chips in Brodie Kemp, to be honest. That's just my take on it. But I think you still need placeholders in those positions, and you still need backup. So look, this is one of the biggest off seasons. I know we say this is the biggest season we've had in,
but it genuinely is.
This is genuinely the biggest off season we're going to have since 2015, since the start of all this.
I think Kemp is certainly one that chips in, and we need to play consistently. For me, they might even experiment depending on what happens in the off season.
Yep.
trying with a Mitch McGovern, seeing it just trying. I mean, you've got that money there. You're not going to be able to move that money for the next 2 years. So you may as well try. It's an interesting one. Before we bring our first guests on, of course, if you don't know, Paolo is the expert at Bet Deluxe, and he's got some mail for you all. So from Mooney Valley, my friend.
Gamble responsibly out there. Make sure you gamble responsibly. We don't want any issues. Yeah, no. There's a few. There's one in particular I like in race 4. It's called Nudge Bar. Race 4, Mooney Valley. Number 6, Craig Newitt, Peter Galagotis, the Galagotis family, big Carlton supporters as well, just quietly. So I think it'll run a very good race. And then the other one is called Sliders, race 1, number 2. At Mooney Valley. The star of Australian racing is in the saddle, Riley. Jamie Carr. She's the best jockey in Australia by a very long way. So race 1, number 2, and race 4, number 6 at the Valley today. So it's the first Group 1 of the racing season as well, the Wink Stakes at Randwick. So very exciting time for me, Riley. It's and for our next guest as well. He'll be flat out with the racing stuff that's going on over the last couple of weeks and into the next couple of months as well.
That he will be. Racing season. It's a treasured part of Australia's sporting culture. The spring carnival, and it's creeping ever closer. First 2 guests of the day, of course, the man that Paul Sebastiani speaks of in the great Lek Dog, with one of the best moustaches you're ever going to see.
Here he is.
And of course, it is outstanding, isn't it? And then the other man, of course, he's a consistent contributor to this show. He's a really good guy. Dom Pang from Osaka. Mate, how are you?
Gentlemen, very good, thank you. It's that time of year. We can look forward to an inevitable loss to a final side in the last game of the season.
That's what
They're sending us off into the sunset for 6 months.
Yes. Do we actually? I was reading the other day, just on that. The last time we actually won a round 23 game was against Port 8 years ago. Since then, we've been consistently whacked. We lost. We drew 2014 against Essendon. 2015, Hawthorn we lost by like 70 something. 2016 we lost to the Asada Bombers. 2017 we got whacked by almost 100 by the Swans when Buddy kicked 10. 2018 105 points against Adelaide. 70 odd points against Geelong in 2019, and then 2020 we decided to send Cade Simpson off with a loss for the man with the most losses in AFL history.
Does that mean the last round 23 we won was the last time we played finals?
Yes.
8 years ago?
It was, yes.
Yes.
The one point win against Port, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, looking back, I'm just thinking about it now. I think we've only won since 2005 one last round game. I'm just thinking off the top of my head now. Yes, it would be, which is that 2013 game. We've won 1 out of our last 16 last round games. That is actually amazingly shit.
What a try. And we've drawn one. Didn't we draw against Essendon? I think
we did.
2014.
One win, 1 draw, 14 losses in the last 16 years. If that's not Carlton, I don't know what is. Lek, I'll start with you. You've been watching throughout the show in terms of the review findings. What are some of the things you're anticipating that might not have been touched on by Paolo necessarily?
Yeah, look, I think it's all the stuff that we expect. There's going to be, they're going to say there's poor internal communications within the different departments, poor management of players regarding development and selection. I don't know if they're actually going to say that one, but that's going to come out with the people that will inevitably leave the club. There's going to be poor management of player training loads. That's going to come up. Why have we had 18 players injured in training throughout the year? They're going to ask questions. I mean, kudos to Andrew Russell. Charlie Curnow is playing football. Williamson's playing football with the other 17 blokes that aren't. I'm a little worried about. They're not going to say this, but coach wasn't ready for the job. I've said this a few times publicly that I was at that 1979 reunion when all the ex-players cheered him on and essentially got him the job. I was sitting on the table next to all of the execs at the Carlton Football Club. I'm telling you, they didn't want him based purely on sitting next to them and the way they were reacting to the crowd cheering. It was a good PR move. I'm telling you that I don't think that they wanted him. They probably talked themselves into him. And all the things that come with a coach not being ready, whether it's match day changes and stuff. And then a big one is going to be, I think you guys touched on it earlier, is non-football staff being heavily involved in football decisions. And it's highlighted with me. I've spoken about this before, that in 2019, when you've got Sauce on trade radio talking about there's no interest in Dan Butler at all, and Kane Little, the CEO, is touring Dan Butler at the club at that very moment, that maybe some people are getting involved in places where they shouldn't. And I think, I think it's going to all come out in the fallout. Like, I think all of the names that are probably not in the gun are like maybe Luke Power and maybe Nick Austin and Andrew Russell, because of their sort of high-profile recruits / money invested into those two blokes. But it's going to come out in the wash when everyone gets sacked, basically.
Yeah. I agree. There's been a gif from the movie Saw where John Kramer says basically there will be blood, and there's going to be a hell of a lot of blood around Princess Park on Monday, like it or not. But Dom, philosophically, let's have a look at the year and the way it's gone, and some of the comments from David Teague in the last two weeks. Has inadvertently the review made the club look worse instead of reacting? Or not reacting, doing what we probably should have done, and if we're real, probably departing with David Teague mid-season because of the way this has played out. I understand there's this perception of, we don't want to look reactive, we want to look different, but the way this has played out since then, it probably would have been just better for me to make that clean break mid-season. Do you agree with that, or do you not necessarily?
I agree that we've been treading water, and basically Teague has been a sitting duck for some time now, and I think that we should have pulled the trigger much earlier. I can't see many reasons why it's beneficial to the club or the playing list to have kept him on for so long, when we were showing consistently that we weren't able to bring an AFL standard performance to the table when it mattered most. I mean, we lost, 10 games where they were kind of games that we had to win for a reason that would have said that we are stepping up a level. And we just didn't win any of those games. So I think by about the fourth or fifth, we knew that something was wrong there. And I think that Teague should have been moved on earlier. I think the club has handled this situation really poorly. It's not been a good look. It's been painful for Teague, but at the same time, it's been painful for the fans and the playing group as well. And I think that we have been wasting time. And, that's also shown with the way how we've approached our selection policy. So, why didn't we put games into Stockerdale and even O'Brien earlier, or get Brody Kemp in earlier? Teague, I think, was in damage control, and we've been paying for it, and we will pay for it next season as well by the slow development of our players. There's just one thing I wanted to add to Dog and your comments about the findings is, I think if they're willing to look at it, it's the current captaincy model. I don't think it's been working. I think that both Cripper and Doherty have been affected negatively somehow in the roles that they've had to play. And I think that the one captain model is much better in terms of showing like a clear direction and giving an opportunity for a player to really stamp their authority. And that's what we've been missing, is like that real sense of authority and commanding presence. And my personal opinion is the sooner that we can move the captaincy on to Sam Walsh, the better. I feel that he's ready, even at a young age. He just oozes that leadership quality. And I personally, again, I don't see that fully in Patrick Cripps or Sam Doherty. I think Cripps will be much better for having that weight off his shoulders. And I think conversely, Sam Walsh will embrace that pressure. And I think he is our next leader for sure. And I think there's also a couple of times, like where Weeders has come out and been asked to show leadership. And I just don't feel like he is the best spokesman as a captain, but I feel that he would be an excellent vice captain.
I think you go on, Lex. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I agree with looking at the captaincy model. I don't like having two captains. I understand the theory of it at the time. You know, Doc was going to be that mature ahead, then Cripper was going to be the lead by example. But I don't think it's worked. I would prefer to go Jacob Wiedering captain, Sam Walsh vice captain. Reason being, I think Sam Walsh is definitely going to be a captain at the Carlton Football Club. But it's I'm having flashbacks to Mark Murphy being handed captaincy at a young age. Bryce Gibbs was in the leadership team before he had played a game of AFL. And we lumped these expectations on these guys, and they were very talented players. And I feel like maybe we went a little too early with those guys. I want Sam Walsh to continue to develop himself. If he wants it, great. But I think Jacob Wiedering's output on the field would be less impacted by a captaincy than Sam Walsh potentially could be. So I would personally go Wiedering and then rotate it to Walsh in a couple of years. But I agree that one captain needs to be seen as the leader. And there should be many leaders throughout the club, but there should be one dude that stands up and, you know, points the bloke in the chest and when it needs to happen.
I think Doherty will probably. I don't know anything, but I think Doherty will probably step down. To be honest, with probably what's happened, you know, I mean, he's got bigger things to worry about than football at the moment. So I think whether it may just be a bolt from the blue god telling him to say, no, it's time for you to just, you know, ease up with all that and worry about your football and your health, and it's time to hand the keys over to the younger brigade. And I think we've seen that on the field as well, gents, and you know, it's the young boys who have really taken the onus. But I think when you talk about leadership, and Dom, you mentioned it before, and you said it, like, we've had about 10 games where we've had to win for different reasons, and we've lost them all. You know? So I think it's.
I kept saying, like, this is the time.
You're spot on. Like, you're spot on.
And it just never happened. You know?
Yeah,
so I switch back to it, and I keep saying, like, they know that they have to win the game. So what's the mindset? What are the coaches instilling into these players when they go out there and take the field? And it's the same thing. It's the same point of view from a tactical perspective as well. Well, how are they setting these boys up to deal with the pressure of games that they have to? I mean, every game you have to win, but there are certain games we've had this year where we thought, no, if we win this game, we'll be in the 8. If we win this game, it says we're here, and we've failed at every test.
I think the Port Adelaide game last week, and this is going to be really cynical of me, obviously 22 rounds, I'm finally a broken man, but at quarter time, I messaged our Carlton group chat and I said, we're in a good spot here. David Teague's now addressing the group. What's going to happen next? And the response from everyone was apple crumble, and we apple crumbled. So whatever they're doing at the breaks, it's not working. Whoever's speaking to them, it is not working. So we definitely need to address that.
I think the apple crumble comparison that my cousin put forth on the Jumper Punch is just a classical, perfect representation of where we are on the field and where we are off the field. It all seems to be going well for certain periods of time, and then the bottom just caves in.
Yeah.
Where's the resilience? You know, it's
nowhere.
No, it's not there. It's not there. It's an interesting. It's almost like the chicken or the egg argument with it, because we've seen it so many times this year where we've been in good positions and crumbled. It's partly, I think, it's the mental resilience at times of the players, but it's also, I think, they're losing faith in what they're being told to do, and therefore it continued the same path. We lose the same way. Like, teams get us the same way, and we get ripped apart the same way, and we do the same things. So I don't know whether that's training and instruction or everyone just has the same fail-safe, but they lose complete faith, and it goes like that. It's why I've been so consistent in the second half of the season that the way we play has the least margin for error of any side I can remember. When it looks good, we look good. You know, when you quick flicking hands and be able to be slick and whatnot. But as soon as something's just a little bit off, whether it's the forward half press, defensive pressure, we give up, just a fraction of corridor space, we get ripped apart. It's an amazing thing to see.
Paolo, can I just add something to that, Riley? I think this also shows, and this has been mentioned throughout the year, about the losing culture at Carlton. When those moments happen, when the pressure is really on and we're looking for that resilience, there's no one in that list who really knows what it takes to step up and go, right, this is where we have to either go into full defensive mode and batten down the hatches, and we're going to fight tooth and nail our way out of this situation, or it's time to really keep our foot on the throttle or on their necks. We never seem to, if we're in a winning position, we never seem to take it that next step and really blow them out of the park, right? We just don't have that conviction in our minds, and there's no one who's able to point out to the other players or lead the players, this is what you do to win in this situation. This is how you book the win. And we need to bring people into the club who are able to change that culture, because, it's just going to continue otherwise, I think.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. There's something I want to ask you all before we get the next guys on, and it's somewhat interesting. We're playing GWS this week, so GWS in a do or die final, basically an elimination final for them tonight to get through. Which, to be honest, because they've been on the road so long, it's a fantastic achievement. They've left their $1 million captain as an emergency for this evening in Stephen Caniglio. Where I'm pivoting this conversation, and we were talking about the captaincy debate a couple of minutes ago, I'm not going to say the fall will be that dramatic, but do we see a situation where, at least from the outside, we could see a Patrick Cripps like that if he maintains the captaincy and his form continues to not be at the level we've been accustomed to and continues to, some maybe start a decline? You've got that 6-year contract over $1 million a year and the captain. It's been a big talking point this year, Cripps' form, I think. Pal, I'll start with you on that one.
I think if Ross Lyon or Alistair Clarkson get the gig, I think you can absolutely see him on the sidelines if he doesn't want to defend, and any name on the list for that matter. I mean, you got to set standards. Doesn't matter how much the player's on. Doesn't matter who the player is. Doesn't matter what they've done in the past. If you don't adhere to those standards that you set, well, what precedence does it set for the rest of the playing group?
Yeah.
People.
I think the calls on Cripps' form has been a little overblown this year. I know that he's obviously had a worse year than previous years, but I still look at his numbers. He's still elite and a hell of a lot of them. But I don't. If a player's out of form and a player's injured, injured, they shouldn't be playing footy. And GWS have made that call, and they've done that a couple of times with Caniglio. If you watch the doco, they did it last year. They dropped him. This year, he's been injured, couldn't really get into form, got injured again. He's not getting back into the team. We would play Paddy Cripps if he had 2 broken legs. If he couldn't walk, we'd put him out there and play him. And that's going to be one of the things that comes down to defining is the integrity of selection, because we've continually done this. We put Jack Martin's played all year since injured and out of form. It's that thing of we don't play the next best player in the position. We just go, no. Paddy Cripps, we don't care that we've got other options. You're playing. And it's why we lose. To play finals this year, all we had to do was beat Collingwood, North Melbourne, and Gold Coast. That's all we had to do. We're in finals. We couldn't do it, and it's because we kept playing players that weren't fit or were out of form. And, it's a massive issue. So while I think the assessment of Cripps has been overblown, if he is out of form and he is injured, don't play him. It shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be a discussion.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. I agree. What about you, Dom?
I agree with Lekdog. I also think that Cripps hasn't played too badly. In fact, I think that there was a turning point midway through the season where Cripps realised that he didn't need to do everything, and you could see him trying to simplify his game and go back to what he was good at. And I think that he's played better since then, even though overall his form's probably been down compared to those 3 years when he won the best and fairest. I think also like the silver lining for, making your captains accountable, when you look at GWS is that they uncovered an amazing leader in Toby Green. And I think that he'll be the next captain of that club. And, when you set those high standards, you can reap some rewards. So I hope our next coach will be able to do that. Although I obviously don't want that to happen to Cripper.
Yeah.
I think that won't happen to him because his form isn't too bad.
Yeah, helps the young guys with standards as well because they know they can't stuff around and not take it seriously.
Yeah, I think the point you touched on there, Toby Green, that's how I see Jacob Wiedering. He's not the most externally, speaking sort of a character, but driving those internal standards and being someone that's come through, he could potentially be, one of those guys as a captain, potentially. But it's an interesting debate. Before we let you go, Lek and Dom, the playing list has been an interesting debate in terms of where it is and where we're going. If you had to use a premiership clock analogy, where do you see from a purely playing list where we've tried to set ourselves up right now?
I mean, I don't know where this lands you on the premiership clock. We're not close to a premiership, but we're definitely a finals side, 8th. And I said it before, all we have to do is beat 3 real shit teams and we play finals. The list is there. The issue for me is not the list. But Murph Betts, Casbolt come out of a guaranteed 22 spot, and we get to try some new things next year, which is nice. So we've got 3 whole spots at least to play with.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree again with Lekdog. I think our list is actually pretty good. Betts referred to it. In fact, it's probably the best it's been in 20 years, to be honest. It's just that midfield that we really need to pay quick attention to. So I'd be going to the draft. I wouldn't be trading pick 6 and getting the best midfielder possible. And I don't mind bringing Cherry in, but I just don't think that we, should be paying a lot for him. And, you talked about this before about overpaying for players and bringing them into the club. And what that does is it sets a low standard about how we, what we expect of our players' performance as against their wages that they have. So I think a lot of the successful clubs, have put a cap on the amount of money that they are paying even their best players. And they're saying, if you're going to buy into this project of us winning a premiership, you have to make some sacrifices. And that's what I want to see happen at Carlton. I don't think it's going to happen in the near future, but if we can get on top of that, I actually think our list is pretty good and we'll be in finals.
Yeah, it's interesting, and Powell, I said this before, the way the last couple of years sort of seem like shortcuts. We're trying to circumvent that playing list premiership clock and get into the window quickly. But the direction we go is going to be interesting this year. Dom, Lek, always a pleasure. Hopefully enjoy tonight, but I don't know if we will.
Let me just say, lose by 90 points. I've got to be right sometime.
One day. Thank you, gentlemen.
It's not going to happen tonight.
Hey, gents.
No.
Enjoy.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, God. 90 points. That is bold. That is bold, my friend.
Well, I reckon that could be an understatement the way we're going at the moment.
Yeah, yes. Last 2 guests of the day, we've of course got the greatest Pom/Scotsman this side of William Wallace and Boris Johnson. Also, Boris Johnson thinks of himself in Pommy and Oz, Dan Williams, and of course the man from WA, everything about recruitment and ruckman, Dane Rawlings. How are you, mate?
Good, yourself? Morning, boys.
Hello.
I am good. It's been an interesting debate this morning. I'm glad we sort of had this instead of talking about the GWS game tonight because that's going to be ugly, I think. Pom, tactically, on a scale of 1 to 10, how horrible has this season been collectively? If you had to describe it in a succinct time.
Oh, I mean, no pace, no passion. Sack him now. I mean, people are saying that, David Teague is a legend. My response to that is was. Yeah, I mean, but serious, right? I'll stop my Andy Tate references for Fowler. I think when you look at David Teague, I mean, it's not a surprise to anyone who actually looked at the numbers last year. I know people say give Teague time and things like that. And, I mean, that's a noble thing. I mean, no one wants to put their family dog down, do they? Do you know what I mean? And some people cling on and cling on. If you were like my nan, she made Princess cling on and cling on and cling on. And it kind of got a little bit gross in the end. But last year, people always say 2-3 goal wins. There was 2-3 goal losses. If we were reversed them, we're in the 4. If you actually look at the analytical data and you added the extra 10 minutes on that we'd missed, we could have finished bottom 2. So these transitional defence issues were there in 2020. We were masked by COVID. So when people say COVID has affected Teague, it's probably bought him 12 months in the job. I mean, I'd say David Teague loves COVID because I would if I could keep my job for a year. So it's not a surprise. Where do we go from here? In the great words of Kevin Keegan, I know what's round the corner, but I don't know where the corner is.
Yeah. No, Dane, should have we? I've asked a couple of people previously. Do you think, with the way the review, in the best of intentions, it might have been to show us as different? Do you think, as a football club, we just should have pulled the trigger in the middle of the year and then reviewed the rest of it as the year going on? Because it's just become a topic of David Teague, really.
Yeah.
What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think definitely the writing was on the wall after that West Coast game. Which was, I think the review was announced after that game, wasn't it? Just before before the bye. So, and I mean, you know, West Coast put their 2 side out, and like since then, I think what have they won, 1 or 2 games, and they've been whacked. So, it probably was like whether, you know, it's the Carlton way of, you know, saying it's an external review on the football department, but really it was on David Teague. If it was on Teague, then just pull the pin, you know, like, I'm not a fan of Teague's. I was critical of, and I hope that the review sort of goes in depth to this around the way he was actually signed. Paulo mentioned it before with, you know, there was obviously the Voss at the airport. Oh, he's been interviewed by Carlton. But, and Pom and I said, you know, going back a couple of years ago, like, we rushed signing Teague. Like, I don't know why we had to sign him before that St Kilda game. Like, what was the urgency in doing it? Why didn't we do a full-scale review then? Why didn't we go and interview, you know, 7, 8, 9 other coaches? Other than the fact that, you know, there's probably 2 things. You know, maybe absence makes the heart grow fonder. You know, we'd won 4 games in 42 or 43. So Teague had come in and he'd won 6 games in 10 weeks. And it's like, well, hang on a sec. How good's this feel? Like, Carlton's up and about and we're winning some footy games again. And, you know, like, maybe that was it. What Leg Doc said as well, like the 79 reunion, you know, the Teague train, you know, Cripper with the hashtag in the media. So, you know, all of those things probably didn't help in that regard. But I'd really love to know around the mechanics of how Teague was employed and, you know, what sort of review went externally for finding another coach in that. So...
Yeah, it's I agree. Paolo, there's been a lot of talk, and you talked about this, the way the last 18 months from a list management perspective has sort of reeked of desperation. Is there any threat, you think, on Nick Austin's job? It's something that's sort of been talked about more recently, you know, with the absence of Williams and that sort of thing. A lot of the players there, like your Martins and your McGoverns, are pre-Austin, but we look at what he's brought in. He's brought Lockie Fogarty, Williams, Sard, Carroll, and Durden. Now, Durden early on, you know, that's a very pleasing debut last week. But do you think, from a list manager, they probably deserve more time necessarily than others to mould their own way because of what he inherited in certain respects, or do you think that it should be on him?
Potentially, to a certain extent. I mean, he obviously did a great job with the Western Bulldogs, but I mean, if this review goes back and determines that decisions that he made and how he made them were not within the interests of the football club, or we're not competent. Well, honestly, that Zach Williams deal alone could be a tap on the shoulder and there's the door. Mate, all it takes is one bad decision and you're done, because that's filled up how much cap space now? What's he on over? How long's his contract?
6 years.
How long is his contract? 6 years? That's like, mate, it's honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he's let go as well, to be honest. But then it comes back in to say, well, is Nick Austin? Can you say with absolute confidence that Nick Austin is the one calling the shots with list management 110%? All those decisions are his. All those calls are his. All those TPP deals are his.
Yeah, no.
And that's where I think in lies a bigger issue.
I agree. It's been people intersecting. I mean, we saw it this year, and the best example we've seen of this year was before that Adelaide Crows game on the Tuesday, Andrew Russell coming out and saying Lockie Plowman's not playing, and then 2 days later he's overruled by David Teague and they select him. When he's come out 2 days earlier and saying he's not fit. And that's just one example of plenty of things you're touching on and plenty of things we're touching on. We just there's people are not working inside. They're just confusing their responsibilities.
Wait until the Pommy and I go to town, mate. Don't worry about that. There's something big coming.
I've seen a preview of that actually.
I brought a trench coat and I've taken some snapshots of me walking at midnight down some alleys.
And I'm just there in the pizza van. I'm there in the pizza van with the walkie-talkie. Yeah, Pommy, we've got it.
We've got one.
The decision making and where it's gone wrong has just been mind-boggling. Maybe a slightly more a different tone. I think they're going to find in the review they're going to retain Luke Power, which is going to be which everyone sort of acknowledges and is seen as a positive, and what he's brought in because of the winning culture. His interview earlier this year with Terry on Blue Report was very well received by us as a fan base, and we've seen some development of players this year that have sort of stepped up. Which player you think has shown the most pleasing signs of development this season? Whether it's a Paddy Dow, it's a Matt Kennedy, who we always thought had it in him. Matt Kennedy, it's finally started to show itself a bit more consistently. Or is it seeing the first few bursts of Josh Honey? Who have you been impressed by from that perspective, from one of the younger lads?
Not surprised or anything like that, because not being big-headed, I picked them. But Josh Honey and Durden, for me, massive. Like, for me, that is something that I was scratching my head round one when we didn't see these guys, because they're modern-day pressure-type forwards. So... And Honey, that he's oversized, he gets in the right positions, naturally now. The small forward position is probably the most underplayed position in the AFL because it's the easiest position to play. You look at all them coming through the draft, they all get into that nomination of Rising Star. You can go pick 30 and some guy comes out. It's a very easy position to pick. And it seems to be a position that Carlton in the last couple of years have dared spend a bit of money on, been threatened to in the trade and free agency period. So it's one of them things to me. I just think good to see, right? But let's keep it on. I'm with Paolo. Carlton can't keep buying themselves out of this mess. People say we need to go back to the Elliott days. Well, we've done that for the last 2 years, just throwing brown paper bags at hacks. I mean, when you look at the Champions data, analytical data on Zach Williams, and he's 1 vote higher than Jack Silvani. Let that sink in. So if you actually crunch Jack Silvani's midfield numbers over the last 2 years, he is 1 rating below Zach Williams. Let that sink in. Just let that sink into you. Gregory Peck breaks you. Yeah,
it's that, and I think you showed me the comparison the other day. It's Zach Williams, Jack Silvani, and our mate Lockie O'Brien, who by all chances probably having his farewell game tonight too. Dane, the draft this year, we've been talking extensively about who we could take it to pick 6. You study it very, very closely. You have for a long time. Who are you thinking? Are you thinking a Josh Rochelle type, for example, or maybe something a little bit left field? What do you see? What do you want to see at pick 6? But assuming we take it in and we don't trade it for Adam fucking Gerrard.
Yeah. Well, obviously there's going to be a couple of academy bids before and a father-son before we get on the board. So pick 6, depending on what happens with the Hawthorn game announced tonight, might be pick 5. But yeah, obviously Darcy and Dacos will go, which probably pulls that pick back to 7 or 8. If Rochelle's there, he's the one. X Factor. He's a Toby Green clone. If he's still on the board, and Pom will back me up on this, then he's the way to go. If it's not him, there's a couple of other guys in the midfield. There's Hobbs, who's a country boy. Clary Oliver, he's got the red hair, he's fiery, he just goes in and under, and he'd probably start in the midfield next year, round 1, next to Walsh. He's a really, really good footballer as well. And the other one is Tyler Sonsi, just all class, left footer, uses the ball better than probably anyone we've got at the footy club. So he would walk into the round 1 side next year as well. So, one of those 3, I think, will be the ones. I've got a sneaking suspicion we might also look at Gibcus, who's an intercepting defender, a bit taller, probably 6'3", 6'4". But I think what Paulo said as well a bit earlier, probably we've got to put some faith in Kemp, and he's just going to play next year. So I hope we don't go the Gibcus way. We can probably get a similar type player with our second round pick. There's Bazzo. Who would be a good shout. But yeah, I think one of those 3 are going to be in around the mid-forward range, and they'd make inroads to playing round 1 straight away next year. So we have to keep that pick. I like the idea of Chera, but we have to keep it. So if Chera does nominate Carlton or whatever's going to happen, we can't trade that pick. That's got to be non-negotiable.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's how important that pick could be for launching us forward. I think it'd be the most Carlton thing ever. I was thinking the other day, we could have taken Chera in the 2017 draft. We took Dow. We played 50 games and we're about to pay him $750,000.
Yeah.
4 years later. It's
Would you pay Dow $750,000?
No, I don't think anyone would pay Paddy. But speaking, just quickly on that, what did everyone think that after a 95-point loss, he's the only one dropped?
Oh, fuck. Ow.
Selection integrity.
What's all that about?
Another thing on the review, just speaking about selection integrity, I get panned from everyone on the forums all year, I'd say, about, playing younger guys and stuff like that. We've had 3 guys debut this year. You could probably say Owies and Honey because they only played 1 or 2 games last year. In comparison, Melbourne, who's sitting on top, or they've dropped a second after last night, they've had 4 Rising Star nominations this year. On top of the ladder, we've played 3 guys that have debuted. So,
and you continue to see, and Paolo will know about this very well because of how much he's had involvement with the VFL this year. Guys like Sam Ramsey playing very good, consistent football. That's actually a good segue, Paolo. For people that haven't watched your VFL reports, what's been some of the pleasing development signs from those players we probably haven't seen at senior level this year, like your Ramseys, your Carrolls, and whatnot? Is there much to take out of them this year, you think, or?
Yeah, well, I think Ramsey was probably the furthest away from getting a game at the start of the year, and then he put his hand up. But the fact that he hasn't really had a sniff in the team tells me that they may err on the side of letting him go. Potentially, it could just be. I think the knock on him is just his defensive aspects. But I think I've liked the look of Jack Carroll, and don't forget he's a very, very, very young. Yes. He's a very young draftee. We picked him up. I think he was only a day or 2 away from the cutoff. Yeah. Is that right, Tommy? I think he's still 18.
Yeah, he would have had the option to go into this year's draft, which I would say he would have been easily top 5 this year.
Yeah. It was 4 days off, I think, He would have been too young for the draft last year, I think it was. Yeah.
So I think those two are the ones that probably could have played this year if they really wanted to go down that path. And as for the rest, look, I mean, Luke Parks he's done his thing. You know, he's no absolute star. He's a competitor. And that's pretty much it, I'd say. I really like the look of Durden down in the reserves as well, and I think he deserves his spot. And I think the one thing with him is that if you bring that hunt and pressure and intent, like the disposals and goals will eventually come if you show that endeavour. It's just inevitable, really. And he seems to have a nous around goal as well, which is good too, and he's zippy. So, look, I mean, my opinion is that, like, I don't know what these younger kids couldn't bring you from an outpoint point of view than what some of these older blokes would give you. Like that's just my take on it. But I just think it's madness to not have played a lot of them throughout the year, regardless of whether you think you're a finals team or not. Even if you think you're a finals team, I don't think that absolves you from playing first gamers.
Well, absolutely. I mean, like
but the older blokes have proven they've not been good enough for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
No, they have, and I think the other thing as well is the younger blokes that we've persisted with have been curious, and this isn't a knock because he's tried hard. But the first name you think of is Matt Cottrell. We persisted with Matt Cottrell, you know, which played a role early because they wanted that defensive intent on the wing. But that didn't work, and he was ended up finishing game with 7, 8 possessions. We continued to try play a Will Setterfield. That's the one for me this year, which just drives me bonkers because of how, you know, I am a big Will Setterfield fan, and I have been. And he came to the club. He was cracking heads as an inside midfielder, and he showed some really good signs last year. And he's fallen off a cliff. They stuck him out on the wing where he hasn't been able to develop, and he's out of contract, and he's in almost D-list territory.
Yeah. I know that there was a moment, I think, I don't know if you use this as an excuse, but a few people were telling me inside the club that there was a moment against Richmond in round 1 where he went back with the flight and he shirked. And ever since then, he's just been, I reckon it's just knocked him mentally, and I don't know. But isn't that up to the coaches to instill that belief back in his career? Because he was trending upwards, like from sort of end of 2019 into 2020, and then he's just fallen off the face of the earth this year. It's probably he's simply not been good enough, and whether or not he's good enough, time will tell. But yeah, he's been super, super disappointing this year.
Yeah, and I think Pom and I said this at the mid-year. The one that we sort of been happy to start to get some games again is Tom Williamson, because he was heading in that direction as well. Now he rebounded a bit, and that was one of the great mysteries in the mid-season. But he's played some games, although the amount of times he likes to fend off just infuriates me. Just as a footballer, just quietly, it drives me mad. Pom, you are one of the list management experts that we all refer to. Where do you see the Carlton, from a pure list position, not the coaching and whatnot, where do you see the club's list position with where they think they might be on the premiership clock per se? And where do you see it? Do we need to take not a rebuild but a reset? Or do you think, and I think that's probably the case you're going to say because of the drafted talent and whatnot, where do you think the club sees themselves, and where do you see it?
Well, I mean, obviously the club see themselves at a conservative 8 or 9 o'clock, don't they? They said they were playing finals this year, so you'd say it's nearly D-Day, wouldn't you? But I mean, I would say in reality, you look at our list, we're probably 3 o'clock. There's still a bit of work to do. We have no natural wingers on the list. If you look at the wingers, do you know what I mean? You've got Lockie O'Brien, who is an absolute brilliant midfielder if he's in space. But unfortunately, in AFL, you don't get space and you don't get time like you did at St Kilda. You saw the difference in his game. St Kilda, he was running in front of no one for most of the game, looked pretty good. Week after, pressure comes. And unfortunately, he hasn't got that game. And that comes down to having natural wingers and having natural half-forward flankers that create him that space. It's not entirely his fault, but his development he hasn't changed since his junior years. He's just grown his hair out. So I think you've got to look. You've got to look at certain things. Like for me, with these picks, I would not be going after anyone outside of the draft. I think my probably one exception would be someone like Maribor Chol. I think he is basically a good version of Levi Casbolt. I think we don't need a ruckman per se. We need someone who can come in and play ruck and play across the forward line and play across the back line, because Carlton aren't in a position to have one full midfielder. I mean, one full ruckman on the bench, like with Pitternet and TDK. So I think that's probably my only one. There's loads of players in the draft, though. We desperately need a midfielder that can tackle a lot, to complement Kennedy and Cripper's work, and definitely two actual wingers. Like, I mean, it baffles me we haven't taken an actual winger since Lockie O'Brien. And literally, you look at the draft every year, I would say it's 20% wingman, 20% half forward, small forward types, 10% on ballers, 10% key position. Like, these are the mass majority, but we just miss them all the time. So
yeah,
I don't think it's far away because it's 3 o'clock. I reckon you do that, you swing quite quickly to 7 and 8. So I don't like the word reset. I just think you start doing things properly. I would call it an unfucker-upper if I was the list manager. Do you know what I mean? Because, people talk about Geelong a lot, and this annoys me. They go, Geelong buy it. No, they don't, right? 30% of their list that plays is traded in. And you look at how they trade in, you've got Isaac Smith there, who he's a placeholder effectively for Clark to take over. Do you know what I mean? They buy players that are there for the now so they can drip feed games to their youth with a bit of protection and a bit of experience. Jack Nooms is the perfect winger that is the placeholder. However, he's in our best 22. So at the moment, he's placeholding probably one of us three and next in line for his role at the moment, because there isn't anyone on the list. And it's all right, people saying play Jack Carroll there. He's an on-baller like Jackson McRae. Would you play Jackson McRae full-time on the wing? Probably not. So that is my issue at the moment. We've got these placeholders there. Who's coming through there? Like, there is literally no wingman on our list, which blags my head.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel like with our list, we've got a lot of the same. We've talked about this before, and a lot of that same isn't necessarily good. So there's massive gaps in certain critical positions, and then we've got, and Teague said it in round 4. We've got like 4,000 inside midfielders. So we've got to play all these inside midfielders in, those sort of positions. Dane, how about you? Do you see it similar to Pom, or do you a little bit more optimistic?
Well, I mean, you said premiership window, so I mean, I just love a taste of a final at this stage. It's been 8 years, so premiership window, probably the same sort of 3-4 o'clock. How quickly that can change. We've still got some big holes that need to be filled. Hopefully, we can fill a couple through the draft. Big pre-season, and like a total. Pom said, don't use the word, but reset. I feel with the coach, there's going to be multiple line coaches, and probably head coach is going to change. So new game plan, accountability to the players. Someone that needs to come in and just says, you know what, like, I don't care if you're Patrick Cripps or Sam Walsh, if you're Jack Carroll, Sam Ramsey, or whoever. Show me what you got, and you can be playing round 1 next year. Yeah,
it's interesting. We got 16 players still out of contract, I believe. So the split of that, who's going to stay, who's going to go, is quite significant.
Going to be huge.
It's been a magnificent conversation. It's been a good, constructive conversation. I've greatly enjoyed it. In a word, what's one thing you want to see in 2022? I'll start. Defensive integrity.
Selection integrity.
Bobby?
What one thing I want to see change?
One thing off the top of your head.
Structure.
One thing I want to see change. It's my wish. One word. Clark's in.
Clark's in. It's Clark's in. Well, from all reports, it's Clark's in or lie in. It's one or the other. It's going to be. It's a massive one. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you to everyone who's watched so far this year. We'll still be on next week to probably dissect the review and what's come out, because we expect that to drop in the next 24 hours. And who knows, we might have a shiny new head coach by then as well. Dane, Paolo, Pommy, love you all. Thank you for joining us. And
Pleasure.
See how we go tonight and the next week.
See you, bro.
Go Blues.
Go Blues.